joining from the United States.
Yes, the United States has woken. We've got Michael and Joanne after this for exactly.
I know. I have a meeting that I have to go to, a local event, and I just messaged Michael to tell him I was going to be in there, but I cannot join Joanne today. But thanks for the invitation. I'm so glad I got to see this.
You are always welcome here. Cheryl, everything will be available to you this evening, well, your midday, on the Interactive Festival Guide, because Hannah's cracked YouTube now. So
okay,
we're sharing. It's all we've got it all going on here. So, awesome. Rob, you have Cheryl in the States, you have Nicole in Australia. Blimey, Nicole, what time is it there? She's got her hoodie on.
11:30.
11:30.
And it's freezing.
And it's freezing. It's still cold. It's still winter in Australia. So we're going to launch straight in because I've just taken 2 minutes of Rob's session, which was naughty. Welcome, Rob. Are you going to introduce yourself and explain your background?
Yeah.
And I'm going to zip it.
Yeah. Okay. Shall I start? Okay. First of all, I'd like to start by saying thank you to Julia and the whole team at Love Tutoring for the opportunity to talk about maths anxiety and maths difficulties, because it's really underrepresented in the whole sort of field of education. And at the Dyscalculia network, we're looking to change that. So I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully that'll work. Okay, is that all looking good? Okay, fantastic. So talk today is supporting students with dyscalculia and maths anxiety. It's probably not enough time today, so if you want any more information after I finish talking, please get in touch with Julia's team, and she'll send a note on, and we'll do what we can to help. Okay. So the Dyscalculia network was born about 2019. Kat Edel and I set it up with because we both, being math specialists, realized that there's just no representation for this special needs. And our aims are to raise awareness of dyscalculia and maths difficulties. I had problems when I first started working with dyscalculia saying the word. So I have a little trick that rhymes with Julia, dyscalculia. So that's just a little good visual hook for that. We also, via the website, provide the UK's only dyscalculia teaching and specialist assessing directory. You can put in your postcode and hopefully you'll find someone in your area to help you. The only trouble being, because it's poorly represented, then there's not enough assessors and not enough specialist teachers. So there may be black spots in the country, but get in touch if you need help and we'll see what we can do to help. We also provide information for parents, all sorts of educational professionals and anybody interested, especially adults, because raising awareness means that people who have had dyscalculia for a long time in their lives and suffered, it means that they're coming out of the and getting in touch with saying all of those conditions you talked about, that's me. We also are now regularly providing dyscalculia and maths difficulties training. So look on the website for any information on that. If you're a teacher, we're doing online courses. So Australia, USA, you're more than welcome. Okay, so a bit of context. Dyscalculia and maths difficulties affects about 6% of the population. That's probably about 5 million people, 4 million adults and 1 million pupils. So recent studies have shown that it's so poorly represented. This is the study from 2021, where they looked at just over 2,500 people. Roughly a quarter required some sort of SEND support, and 5% of that were diagnosed with dyslexia, but 0.04% was diagnosed with dyscalculia. And roughly the same numbers affect both conditions. And it's really badly represented on here. So you're 100 times, doing the maths, you're 100 times more likely to get diagnosed with dyslexia than you are with dyscalculia. That's shocking. What is dyscalculia? So dyscalculia is defined as a specific and persistent understanding of numbers. Then it can lead to a range of difficulties with mathematics. It occurs across all age groups, different levels of education, gender, and abilities. So it really does across the board affect a wide range of people. And we classify maths difficulties as a kind of a continuum line, with dyscalculia firmly placed as the kind of end of that line. I love this kind of definition. You can download this definition of dyscalculia from the Scottish Education website. It's free. But I love the graphics. I love the infographics. It gives you a list of some of the key indicators of maths difficulties, dyscalculia. Problems estimating, subitizing. Subitizing is the ability to count a small number of objects to identify a small number of objects without actually counting them. You know, like Mother Duck will look around and see her 3 ducklings behind her, but she wouldn't count them, but she'll know innately that that's okay. People with dyscalculia have trouble with subitizing, so it's one of the indicators here. There's also ordering and sequencing directionality. A lot of dyscalculic pupils will flip the digits. So the number 2 will end up looking like a number 5 and vice versa. Everyday tasks involving money and time is a real problem for these students. But I think the most important part of this slide, if you like, is the impact of how it affects us as a barrier varies in degree to the quality of learning and the teaching environment that we provide for them. So early intervention is always better, and it helps us to sort of put in place the proper intervention. Just a couple of general factors which make maths hard to learn. It's quite an abstract topic. You know, what does area mean? What's the difference between area and volume? Unless we have something concrete that we can look at to see the difference between like a 2D shape and a 3D shape, it's quite abstract. It's also complex, involving lots of different language. I don't understand why there's 7 different words to mean add, more than, the total of, the sum of. You know, it just makes it more and more confusing, and there's an element of space in it as well. But I think the thing that really affects how is the way that maths is taught in some schools very quickly, and there's a real emphasis, which I really dislike, is the emphasis on rote learning. You know, the Friday afternoon times table test, how quickly you can answer 10 questions. You know, that's not a learning of, it's not an understanding of your ability in maths. That's just a rote learning exercise. It's equivalent to, say, learning the capital cities of Europe, you know, and asking what's the capital of France. You know, has no relevance to your understanding of geography per se. So we really are against overloading people's working memory and memory for when learning maths. Maths is a very building block subject, so it relies heavily on the foundations of maths, the key foundations like all the calculation skills, understanding of place value, understanding what the basic fractions and decimals represent. So at the Dyscalculia Network, we've come up with this concept called the Jenga effect. I'm sure everyone's played this fantastic game, and I'm promoting the game now. But we see maths as a really modular topic, and the kids and the adults that struggle with maths have had some of the foundation bricks taken away and placed on top. A lot of the intervention in schools is at the wrong level. If, for example, they might be struggling with fractions, then they're sent out and to do more fractions. Whereas there might be a more fundamental thing that's not working in, say, for example, division skills. So they're not able to do simplifying of basic numbers. So this Jenga tower with bits missing is what we classify as someone as a classic dyscalculic student. And what we try to do is to create a more structured and complete Jenga tower on the right-hand side. So how can we provide this firm foundation to help with maths difficulties? So first of all, we have to look out for this, and that's the things we talked about with the Scottish definition. Look out for the indicators, subitizing, the inability to remember calculation techniques, the reliance, over-reliance using the fingers, counting up and back in ones. All of these things are indicators that we need to investigate further. The further investigation is an assessment to sort of find out the strengths and weaknesses of that individual, which we base our teaching intervention plan on. When we do the intervention with that individual, it's really important to sort of to put it at the correct level. Don't just you know, go back to what they're sort of struggling with in the class. We need to go right back to the foundation areas, because if they're not secure, they're going to have knock-on effects throughout their whole maths education. But what I would recommend is maybe even go back beyond that. So you start the lesson with something they can do. You'll be amazed at the effects of saying, wow, my first lesson with you, and I've been getting right answers, and I can do this stuff. It's a huge confidence boost for the individual that's been struggling and can't do stuff in class. So start with something that you're going to build on success. Scaffolding learning is really important as well. You know, trying to do as little steps as possible, and don't go on until you've really like cracked that for this part of the maths learning that you're doing. So then just to summarize quickly here, is that it needs to be understanding based, not rote learning. Use lots of concrete models, because maths being really abstract, you have to use these models to prove what these are, what they work at. You know, a 10 is like 10 individual ones, and if you're using place value maths, then you can see categorically using concrete materials that that's the value of 10. And if it's in the ones column or the units column, then it's only has a value of 1. So these are really important to use concrete materials. You need to be very carefully structured. So there's lots of pre-skills you need to do to successfully, say, for example, teach times tables. You need to have an idea that multiplication is really step counting. So you're adding each step by whatever times table you're working. And then you also can take away step counting. So that understanding that multiplication is like repeated addition and subtraction is really important. And so you have to sort of work on your addition and subtraction skills before you can then implement the program of understanding and working out the times tables you need to do. So that's the kind of case of not allowing the children to learn by rote the times tables. They can use things, for example, like the keys to the times tables. Because even when certain students understand multiplication is effectively step counting, the tendency is to start from the beginning. So if they have a question, say, for example, 6 times 8, they'll go 1 times 8, 2 times 8, and all the way. But that's 6 different calculations. So you're creating even more pressure on them to do that work, even though that they can understand where they can get to. A better way to do it is something which we call the keys to the times tables. And that's just 3 of the times tables working together. That's 10 times. 10 times 8 is 80. 5 times 8, 5 is half of 10. So that means half of 80 will be 40. And then 2 times 8, or double 8, and that's 16. And then use those, if you like, keystones to sort of move up and down the times tables to get to your answer. It's very reasoning based. It means they don't have to sort of remember things by rote, and they can apply that and extend that. So you find that once they've got that, they can work at 11 times and even 12 times, 13, because they're just adding on an 8 each time, and they don't have to go back to the beginning. Use language children understand. Encourage them by using maths games. We love maths games at the network, and we try and do it as much as possible because it's a really good way of reinforcing teaching topics. And it's a good way of reducing the maths anxiety as well. Why play games? The learner doesn't realize they're learning. They're more productive. It helps them understand what numbers are. And I use them in particular as a really good way of reinforcing skills or topic that you've just been working on together. There's loads of different games, and at the network you can download free games from our blog. And if there's a particular topic you don't see on there, just write to us and then we'll get back to you with some ideas of what to do. But overall, the games are going to reduce the anxiety and improve the confidence of the learner. Maths anxiety, huge topic in its own right. And before you got any chance of helping with someone's maths education, you have to sort of deal with this maths anxiety. It's prevalent across the board. In latest studies of OECD countries, it could be as high as 25% of the population. You know, I wish I had a pound for every time you hear someone say, "Oh, don't worry about their maths. I've never been good at maths." What we're doing is we're passing on that anxiety to our children. So the symptoms for maths anxiety can be physical and psychological. Nausea, shortness of breath, sweating. We've all sort of experienced the Friday afternoon stomachache, or can't go to school because they've got a maths test or whatever coming up. It's a symptom of maths anxiety. But also importantly is the negative self-talk, maths avoidance, the isolation, thinking they're the only ones that are not very good at maths. And all of these symptoms and negative maths attitudes lead to something called a cycle of failure, which kind of over time, not addressed, it's going to make things worse. Avoiding doing maths means that their preparations for the next lesson is going to be less, means the poor performance next time is even worse. And so it's a never-ending cycle that we have to kind of break. Make maths fun. We need to sort of, you know, do all the things we were talking about before about the intervention to help. Some idea of numbers. Here we have some latest stats. 1 in 5 parents study for arithmophobia, fear of numbers. 1 in 10, 8 to 13-year-olds in Britain suffer from math anxiety. I mean, these are kind of, I think, conservative numbers that are sort of some of the latest research. I think people are a little bit, maths is quite a unique topic. People are sort of reluctant to say that, you know, how actual scary maths is to them. So I think kind of these are the sort of just the tip of the iceberg. So I've got some tips now in the classroom and what we can do at home to help. So I think the key is early identification. We need to sort of, as soon as we spot someone that are exhibiting some of the symptoms of anxiety and problems with dyscalculia, we need to sort of put them on the sort of register, look out, see what we can do. Look out for any of those physical signs of anxiety. We talked about the stomachache, and develop more grounding techniques, to sort of like breathing exercises, or trying to sort of like introduce some more positive aspects of maths. And the way to do that is using sort of some growth mindset, introducing some more positivity within that, and you know, the intervention at the right place, preparing for success, goes a long way to sort of changing this mindset. We need to adjust our teaching styles, especially when we're teaching, for example, new topics. We need to be mindful that, you know, anything new out of the ordinary is going to cause anxiety in some of our pupils. So it can be introduced using it as a game, or we can spend a lot of time using the concrete materials, diagrams, etc. We need to chunk, so we do small wins. So there's no good trying to go too fast on a topic. Take your time. Revise and record vocabulary. So we use a consistent use of the same language, and language that the pupils used to. As I said before as well, using concrete materials to sort of demonstrate how things work, really, really important. I think this is key for me as well. Recognize maths is all around us. Start to introduce examples from our daily lives. You know, we use money less these days, but you know, how far things are to the shop, how long it's going to take us to do something, how big something is, you know, all maths type questions. But the more we can introduce, the more normal it becomes. And like I said before, take away any pressure. Not rote learning, it's not the way forward. And putting pressure to do something in a given time, immediately, blank means they blank out and can't remember what they've been taught. So give them time to sort of come up with stuff about how it works. Just a few tips about what we can do at home as well. Practice little and often. I think kind of this is kind of key here as well. We tend to, well, in my household, in the past, we used to sort of leave the homework to Sunday afternoon. There used to be a big rush to get everything done for Monday morning's hand-in time. But now we've introduced, like, just before dinner, just after dinner, we have 15 minutes going through a few key topics. And then you don't have to do something, you can just relax, knowing that, you know, you don't have anything to do. At home, you need to don't try and teach anything that's not been taught yet. Techniques are changing in schools all the time. So what I would recommend is you just work on the stuff as a kind of revision guide and reinforce stuff that's already been done. As we said in the classroom, maths is part of everyday life. The more you can introduce, the better. Make maths fun using games as much as possible. Talked about this before as well. Don't pass on any maths anxiety. I've never been any good at maths. It's not something to do, because we're just lowering the expectations for the child and giving them the sort of, if like, lowering the bar so that they're not going to be able to do, try, put the effort in to do themselves. Again, like in all topics where there's anxiety, get them to talk about their anxiety. What is it? Is it a particular teacher, particular class? Is it the topic base? You know, the more they open up, the more you'll get to the bottom of what's causing the anxiety. I think teaching children to ask questions when they don't understand it. This applies to all topics, but it's really important, because if you're struggling with a topic, especially maths, you're really going to be reluctant to ask questions. But I think in an open type environment, in the classroom and at home, I think that's really important. And as parents, communicate with your class teacher, and so that we can all be singing from the same, like, hymn sheet, and communicating and doing things together in the same way, rather than clashing and doing a different technique or something like that. And remain calm. I've left, as part of the slides, there's 3 links here. There's the Maths Anxiety Trust, which is a fantastic organisation set up to address issues with maths anxiety, and they've got lots of useful guides on the site. There's also in Derby University, there's a maths anxiety research group with MUG, and they have really useful things there, like sheets that can indicate how anxious you are at maths, so this actual scales. And there's also tips on the site as well to deal with it in the classroom and at home. And obviously through the Dyscalculia network, here's our website, and you know, we've got lots of useful guides on here. And if you write to us, we'll definitely get back to you with some recommendations. Okay. And it's just, again, a huge thank you for being involved. This is really
Padre, en el nombre del Señor Jesucristo, Padre Celestial, Espíritu Santo,
Marina.
Señor nuestro.
Oh, I quite wanted to have a Spanish lesson then as well.
Yeah. If there's any questions or anything.
Come on, you guys, you got 4 minutes with Rob. And he's not tired at all. He's just taught an entire academy today.
Oh, hi. I'll start off. How do you help in terms of stopping that reaction when you say, I'm not good at maths, for a student and for maybe a parent?
Well, when we talked about intervention, I think the key is to sort of plan for success. So you need to sort of start some revision lessons on stuff they can do. And what you'll find is that it's after being successful and getting stuff done, I also think less is more as well. You know, often children will go home and they'll have a sheet full of 50 questions, whereas you don't need to do that many. Maybe 10 questions enough on a topic would be enough. It will enable them to complete the sheet. So a lot of the time they're not able to do all 50 questions. You know, they're trying so hard to get some of them done. So if you're able to sort of set them less, cover the whole kind of topic, and they achieve that, then again, that's a success that will help them move on.
Super. I've got one as well. So my 15-year-old has noticed that he doesn't mind maths. He just doesn't like the way that maths is taught in school.
Yeah.
And he really struggles with anxiety himself in general. And I think that there's something about the teaching of maths that is heavy, but also that is really details oriented in a way that doesn't suit him.
Yeah.
Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, absolutely. The problem with maths teaching is the teachers that go into teaching maths are passionate about maths, and they are good teachers, people that get it. But they don't really get, and I speak generalization, and I don't want to do anyone a disservice, but people that don't get it, they're less connected with that sort of outcome. They're less able to be able to teach that sort of level in general. And I think kind of the focus of teaching from the board in a rigorous type way is not good for the people that struggle. They need to be able to sort of be involved, find some relevance about how it's affecting their life to make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely right. I wonder what the maths tutors in the room think about that when you're going in, if you sign yourself up to be a maths teacher, you probably find maths manageable, should we say?
Well, you love it too, and that passion comes across.
So that's the flip side of it. I certainly know that as a primary tutor, as a primary teacher, I wasn't great at teaching maths because I didn't break it down into its smallest pieces. I used to skip too quickly, and I could see when I lost them. So I was always aware of that.
But also the teacher training focused mainly on literacy.
That's right.
It's hardly any maths help support.
And I wonder whether that's also to do with relying on the sequencing in the textbooks more in maths. Elaine and Cheryl, I want to hear your questions, but I'm not sure we're going to have time to answer them because Michael's just arrived. So can we hear the questions so that we can process them and mull on them? Would that be all right with you, Rob?
Yeah.
Awesome. Cheryl, go ahead.
I was also thinking the same thing about literacy, and I didn't know if anybody had a link or some sort of a curriculum. I had to walk out of the room for a minute. You might have missed it. I might have missed it. But is there a curriculum that is based specifically for dyscalculia students at the lower grades? I saw your tools. I was listening from the other room. But is there a specific curriculum that anybody has found?
But if you look at Jane Emerson and Patricia Babtey's book, The Dyscalculia Solution, that tells you how to teach children that struggle at the bottom end.
I appreciate you repeating that. Thank you so much.
It's called The Dyscalculia Solution by Jane Emerson and Patricia Babtey. It's like the Bible for teaching children that struggle.
Okay.
Oh, look at that, Helen. Thank you so much. And I used to use Ronit Bird's book as well, which is good.
Oh, that's brilliant. And she does some fantastic games.
Yes.
Resources.
That's right. That's right.
The basic fundamentals about helping with number sense and stuff. It's a good starting point.
Awesome. Thank you. Is that all right, Cheryl? Great. Elaine, you put your hand down. Come on, bring it.
Yeah, I was just going to ask really quickly if you had any tips. I've got a girl in year 10 and she has possibly the worst maths anxiety I have ever seen. And she's already stressing about her maths GCSE in a year's time. And I want to, help with her stress, but also, how on earth am I going to get through this exam?
I think kind of the anxiety is affecting her maths performance possibly. And maybe some maths games aimed at that GCSE level would be really important. I think also it's what we're working with some pupils is their how they revise, because sometimes the textbooks within the maths curriculum at GCSE level are so thick and inaccessible. We need to do something about that. So we're doing some work on helping children that are at that struggling side to revise. There's lots of, you can go to the shops and buy like these great revision guides, but they fit so much onto individual pages. It doesn't really help someone that doesn't like clutter.
I wonder whether some of the AI-driven curriculum resources might be useful in that context, because then you can't see all the chapters ahead of you.
Yeah.